Hello and happy Tuesday. Thank you so much for joining our latest webinar, Balancing Creativity and Efficiency and How to Optimize Your Content Operations. I'm Nicole McLean, Head of Growth Marketing here at Composely. I'll be your moderator today and guiding us through the conversation. And I'm so excited to be joined by just an incredible overall marketer, but content thought leader, powerhouse, all of the great buzzwords, but she absolutely lives up to it. Amy Higgins. She's an award-winning senior marketer. Hopefully, if you saw in some of the promo, has worked at some amazing brands, bringing optimization to their content like Google, Salesforce, Twilio, and most recently at Lyra Health. She has a great way of bringing the story and really the customer journey. We're going to talk about that later, but making sure that you're meeting your customer where you are. She's currently the director of content strategy at Lyra. I maybe if we have time would love to hear, but she is definitely a adventure seeker, so loves being at the outdoors, diving, hiking the tallest mountain, all of this fun stuff. So maybe at the end you can give us a little insight into some of those great travel stories. But everyone, please meet Amy. Amy, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, and hi everyone. Excited to be here. Excited to dig into this. Efficiency and operations are one of the things I love to do. And then, I mean, we're all content marketers, so creativity is always top of mind.
Absolutely. Before we get started, I do want to just let everyone know, everyone in the audience is on auto mute. So please use the chat and the Q&A feature. I'll be keeping an eye on both of those throughout the webinar. We are recording, so feel free to take notes, but we will send a copy of the recording as well as the slide deck and any templates that we talk through today. And then last but not least, I always like to say, we're working from home, things happen, cats might join, dogs might bark. It is welcome to being in the post-pandemic world. So just have a little grace. And if anything goes wrong, we'll troubleshoot and get right back to you. But let's dive in. We have a lot to cover. So first, I'm very interested to get Amy's perspective on this. But before, I have a quick poll, and I'm interested to see everyone in the audience. Do you think that content is a brand function, a demand function, or both? So I'll go ahead and leave this open for a little bit, but curious to get your guys' responses. And then Amy, would you like to give your response before or after seeing what the audience has to say?
I think I want to give it after. I tried to respond in the poll and I can't, so I'm gonna hold my tongue.
You get a whole poll just to yourself. All right, I'm going to end because we have most folks who have dialed in, but unanimously, everyone said both. I almost didn't include that as an option because that's what I hoped people would say, is that it's both, and was going to force you to pick one. But yeah, Amy, I'd love to hear what do you think? Where do you think this falls?
I think it's both. The hard part is where you sit. So currently I sit on the brand team. My previous role at Twilio, I sat on a combo team of campaigns and content. Previous to that at Salesforce, I sat on the PMM team. And then I also sat on the brand team. And then I sat on a separate team called the experience team. So
where did the experience team sit? In marketing?
In marketing, it was its own little like nuance, like a integration between brand and demand and PMM. Kind of fit right in there. But yeah, it's really both, but how you talk about it and who you talk to depends on who you report into.
Absolutely. How have you seen that impact the goals or what your KPIs or measure of success looks like?
I think for content, the goal should always be the same. So you're always looking at, do we bring people in? Do we keep them engaged? Do we move them through the funnel? And most importantly, last but not least, do we create customer advocates? So if you are on, let's play the journey. If you sit on the demand team, they're really going to look at the ACV value and how much market demand do you create. If you sit on the brand team, they might look at, are we being aware? Are we bringing people into the funnel? Are we top of mind? Do we create advocacy? Do we create brand differentiation? So they're going to look at those big numbers versus the demand numbers. And so it's just how you present things to the team. So like if I sit on the demand team, I might bring to the front, hey, we hit our goals of 200 times marketing generated pipeline. 200 times. But we amazing. Yeah. But we got there because we did all this SEO work. We got there because we did all this PR work. We got there because we redid our website or redid our messaging, redid our design. Where if it's the flipped, say you sit on the brand team, then you're like, hey, we just launched a new website. Here's how much traffic we're bringing in. And by the way, once they get to this traffic, here's where they go down the demand funnel. And here's where they're raising their hand and saying, hey, I want to talk to sales.
Right.
And so you just switch the order of how you talk about it.
So yeah, that was going to be my follow-up question. Regardless of where you sit, should you be tracking both?
Yes, always. You can't have one without the other. It's like you can't put on a bottom without a top. I mean, you could, but probably not.
Yes. A jumpsuit.
Probably not. Yeah, a jumpsuit. Jumpsuit kind of makes it hard to go to the restroom though. But you want to think about, are you having full funnel activation? And are you measuring those stages of the funnel? If you just focus on one, like if you're just focusing on did people fill out the form, you're probably going to have really low MQL to SQL conversion. You might have a bunch of people raise their hand to be interested, but then they're not going to be interested in talking to sales. Or worse, they raise their hand, they fill out a form, they look at it and like, this is not what I want, and they never come back. And it's harder to regain them as a prospect.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say? I mean, I've been in that situation where you have a board member or you have another leader that very much cares about one side of those metrics and kind of misses the other. Like, how would you advocate for yourself as a content leader to help showcase the full thing when you have someone who maybe is really focused on one side of the other of that spectrum?
I mean, you still give them the focus on that one side of the spectrum. You still say, this is what's working. This is what numbers we hit. But I find the most valuable input is to look at the analysis. So yes, we hit our MQL goals, but 20% of our MQLs turn to SQL. So what happens to that 80%? 80% of them didn't go all the way through because they didn't engage with any activity before that gated asset, or they didn't engage with any of the nurtures. And so you have to define the story of what's really happening and why. And don't boil the ocean, just pick like one or two things. And then you get that aha moment with your leadership team.
I like that. So we definitely got a couple questions kind of about this in pre-registration, but I'm curious, how has where you sit impacted who your key stakeholders are? Or maybe I should even say where you get the most amount of requests. You know, when you're in brand, do you hear from sales more or less for that last minute pitch deck update content piece?
I would say when I've sat on product marketing, it's more bottom of the funnel. When I sit on brand, it's more top of the funnel. And the challenge is looking at the leadership team who sits above all of them to really set the priorities. So when you get that last minute request, you can say, I love your idea. This is wonderful. Let's go back to our top goals for the quarter, the top goals for the year. How does this align? Do we need to change the goals? Do we need to reprioritize? And you really have that open conversation, and almost you have to coach up. So you have to ask them questions so they discover the answers themselves.
We could probably have a whole nother conversation about how to coach up effectively and build that skill set.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I think can help with that is the meat of today's conversation, which is workflows itself and pulling in those stakeholders. I think marketing is always so interesting because we are at the center of everything, and you do have to have that skill set, and having good process and good workflows is one tool to kind of help keep everyone aligned.
Yeah.
So we have a couple templates, we have some slides. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. But I know we kind of wanted to talk first and foremost about how to best articulate who's all involved and just kind of start there. So I'll let you kind of talk about a really fun tool that we like to use called a RACI.
Yeah, I love RACIs. I don't know how I lived without them. Ask my friends who go on vacation. I probably put RACI on our vacation plans as well. But really, it's
Smart.
yeah. RACI stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. Really, what it's about is responsible is who are the people or person who's getting the work done, who's leading it. The accountable is who's held accountable or whose job's at risk, we think about like that, for not meeting the numbers. So who's the final say? Consulted are who are those integrated partners that you're working with to get the work done? Who do you need feedback from? Who do you need clarification from? Who might be doing the creative? All of that. Informed is really just the FYI. Who do you need to keep in the loop, but you don't need feedback? You don't need them to respond to anything, but you need them to know what's going on. The caveat is sometimes that changes, where you might consult people and then once they're consulted, they become part of informed, or vice versa. But the one stage that people usually mess up is the responsible and the accountable. You can only have one person with accountable. They need to have the final say so.
Yep. And I feel like whenever, because for some reason, marketers and product marketing always has dotted line reporting structures. And I've never seen a dotted line reporting structure work well. Other people have told me they've seen it. And if you're really, really clear on your RACI and you have one accountable, maybe, but oftentimes I feel like it doesn't work because there are actually two accountable who may not always agree on the priority.
Yeah, I would just say make one accountable.
I did launch a quick poll because I was interested to see in the audience who's used a RACI before, and we're really split down the middle. About half have used this before and half haven't. So hopefully, if you haven't seen this before, this will be a good resource for you.
Yeah. The other one to use is Rapid, but I forget what that stands for. I actually don't like it because it's so long that then you wonder who's accountable, who's responsible, who's providing, who's impacted, who's delivering. I think that's what it is. Responsible, accountable, deliverable, informed. I forget the P is, but yeah, this keeps it simple.
Well, and we have a nice.
Speaking of cats interrupting, my cat just jumped up on my desk and spilled everything over.
Are they informed or consulted in this example?
My cat?
Yes.
Right now? Probably informed, but they messed up and tried to be consulted, which is where the water spilled.
There you go. We do have a nice example of this to kind of play out an actual thing, but I also think doing this ahead of time, ahead of planning, or before you actually execute is really important. Also, because I think sometimes there are stakeholders that think they might be one thing when in fact they should be another. And I think it's a chance where things get off the rails. I mean, how many times I feel like most of us would raise our hand, do you get through and you're 80% of the way done, and then someone comes in last minute that you didn't expect to be consulted or informed or provide that feedback. And now all of a sudden we've completely rescoped because we've kind of thrown it off. And so I think having this upfront, make sure everyone is aligned and agree to where they sit in this is a really important piece as well.
Yeah. And I tried to keep this simple. When I put content or campaigns, it's usually one person. So this is an example of, say you're doing a big state of work at home report. Usually who's designing the survey would be someone on your research team who is writing the final survey. That's usually the content team. It might be one person, it might be three, it might be It might be your content lead with a freelancer. Webinar, usually your campaigns, your demand gen function, blog series could be your content writers. And then you'll see that the consulted and informed changed. So like in the final survey, sales should be informed of it, where you have a sales enablement. Here's the survey we did, here are the key points, here's how to bring it up, but they really don't have any input. Same thing with the webinar. Hey, we're doing this webinar. If you have a customer or prospect who's interested, here's a good link to give them to. Consulted on the webinar, campaigns might be running it, but say you have a customer involved, you want product messaging, you want someone to dial in the content. So you're going to have someone from the content, customer marketing, and PMM team joining.
Absolutely.
And I'm sorry to use the acronym PMM. It's Product Marketing Manager.
Thank you for clarifying. I was going to say, this definitely is a great example, especially at a larger organization where you have multiple teams. And Eracy is so great because it kind of, I think, removes some of those silos, make sure that in a larger org, everyone's working together. In a smaller org, like a startup where you have 3 people on your team, you might wear multiple hats. You might be all 4. You might be responsible and accountable. And, when you have this hat on, you're consulted. And when you have this hat on, you're accountable. And I think in smaller orgs, we tend to skip this process, or especially I feel like a real use case. We know a lot of folks have been impacted by team reduction and either having to use freelancers or having to wear more hats where maybe they had someone. And I feel like we skip this because it's like, well, I just have to do everything. But then there is always someone that should be consulted or someone that needs to be informed. And if you don't document that, you might be able to move faster, but you end up slowing yourself down in the long run.
Yeah. And to go back to the topic of the webinar, by creating this optimization, you help create that efficiency, to your point, Nicole, that at the end, you don't have to redo the process because you forgot to consult this person or that person.
Exactly.
And when you have those forcing functions of people being like, oh, but I needed input, you kind of get in this headspace of like, let me just get my work done. And you lose that whole part of being creative. So this just gives you a blanket slate that you can really be creative and thoughtful in your process.
Absolutely. And that's such a great tee up for the next resource we're going to talk about, which is in planning. And I think that is such a great idea and a great opportunity to pull in some of those consulted folks to get that input from the jump. But then you take what you need, and as the actual executor, as that person who's responsible, you take it, but you apply it as you need to. So I'll let you chat through an integrated content brief.
Okay. I kept this very, very simple. Integration is a very hard word to think about. How do we become integrated with all the teams? So this is a great place to start, whether if you're 3 people or 3,000 or 60,000. You really want to think about what's your primary objective for one thing. It might be an event. It might be a pillar piece of content. What do you really want to get out of it? What timeline? Is this something that we need to launch next quarter because a product's launching? Is this something that we are ongoing for all of H2? And then you start to think about the teams. And so one of the easy ways to break it up is to think about your personas and your audience overall, and then think about the value props and the pain points that matter to that persona. And then think about what their priority is, like what's going to be the hook that changes things, and what's the priority for the business.
Yeah.
And then that starts to divide into different topics. So you can really become differentiated. And lastly, but not least, you think about the deliverables that you need to make that goal and what sections of the journey are missing. So it involves a little bit of a content audit, a prioritization with your team, and a deep dive into your audience and sales funnel. So what are your win-losses with sales?
Absolutely.
And this is very, very B2B focused. So if anybody has questions about B2C, put something in the chat and we'll make sure to cover those.
Great point. And I know in the next slide, we're going to show an even greater high level view. But when we were talking in prep for this, oftentimes some of this can live in disparate things. Like you have your persona deck, that lives somewhere, and then you have your timeline, and then what teams are involved, might be your RACI. But it's so important to have that one source of truth, that one place of visualization, that everything lives together. And I think this, like you said, is simple, but allows you to have that viewpoint.
And some of the other things that help is thinking about market moments. And every company's different. I worked at one company that we were driven by our events. We like to say that we were we were an events company posing as a software company, because we did so many events. So we led things by those events. I worked for a travel company where we were led by consumer events. So this is summer season, this is holiday season. So you start putting pins in the calendar around those key market moments.
Absolutely. And so with that, there is this great overview that I'll let you dive into more of, okay, so you have this snapshot, but how do you now actually gain efficiency in creating those deliverables?
Yeah. And this is a real life example. This is 2 quarters last year's planning from a different company. We had one audience breakdown. So this was one key pillar. And in that audience breakdown, we had 3 different topics that we really wanted to talk about. So you'll see in the discover phase, which I call this, I learned this from a previous boss, Jessica Bergman at Salesforce. Discover is they have no idea about your product. They have no idea they have a pain. We're interrupting their train of thought and giving them content that they otherwise wouldn't look for. So things like your big state of reports that might hit a news cycle, things like a thought leadership article on Forbes, very top of the funnel search, like what is, would be in this stage. And then next you go into awareness, which is they have a problem, they're aware of it, they're looking for a solution. Consider, they're looking at 5 different solutions. Decision, it's between you and your competitor. And so what we started to do is you do a content audit. What do you currently have that fits in these topics? Where are your gaps? Then you do a resource audit. Who do you have? What resources do you have? Budget, people, timeline. And then you think about what's possible. And you'll notice all the different color codes is a different planning cycle. So we start planning with the priorities, we line things up, and then all the little purple arrows is how everything connects and what the CTA is. A lot of businesses fail because they'll do one thing and jump all the way to the end, or they'll just stick in the middle and forget about the beginning and the end.
Well, I think what's nice about this is it can sometimes be hard to big, small silo, you're one person, but trying to remember everything to point, oh, I jump here, but now I have to remember to go back and do the middle. And this is fairly chronological, but I think it gives you that view of the web and how everything works together. So you don't have to worry about forgetting to go back and link something together or update the process.
And the other reason I like this is it's a single source of truth. A lot of times you'll have 50,000 different spreadsheets and it's hard to see how everything's interconnected. So this can go back to the priority conversation. Our webinar team wants another webinar, but we have nothing before the webinar. Yeah.
We always want another webinar. And then the last, I know we're getting close to time here, but the last piece is, I think, often where most people start is, oh, I have this asset, I have this point project, this point campaign that I want to work on, and I'll create a really good brief for this one point. But maybe we don't spend the time to do that more 10,000 view look and how it all works together. And so I just reinforce how important that front end planning is, but also we wanted to work on a good brief for that kind of individual asset or individual point along the journey.
Yeah. And it also helps when you have the RACI that you can look at stages. And I think having all of these things figured out, what's the storyline? What audience are we looking at? What are the pain points we want to talk about? Where are they coming into? Where are they going? What's our budget? Who's doing this? Having that just simply dialed in gives your team the space to write effectively and creatively. and also can give your creative team more room to do, fun graphics, or maybe this doesn't need to be a blog, maybe it needs to be a video, or maybe it needs to be a blog with a video.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And an infographic. Just throw it all in.
Social campaign.
I love that you talked about both your content audit, but also a resource audit. And especially for anyone who's in a leadership seat, I feel like that's what you get asked all the time is, cool, you're going to do it, but how are you going to do it? Or here are your goals, and how are you going to accomplish it? So before we jump into some of the Q&A, I'm curious just how you think about approaching that resource audit and determining the right resources, when, where, budget, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, you have to look at what your entire team is capable of doing, what they excel at, what they want to learn more of, and really have that honest conversation with your team and your leadership and yourself of, this is something new, so this is going to take us longer. Or this is something that we've done before, we got it down, this will be no problem. Or this is an entirely different topic that we've never done before, so that consulted column is going to be 4 times as long. Yeah. Or sometimes this is something brand new, we don't know how to talk about it. Do we have a subject matter expert? If the answer is no, then you can't do the content right now.
Well, and to that point, how do you think about if it's new and you're trying to learn, do you outsource there and outsource someone who has that niche and learn it? Or do you pull it in-house because you can't inform that resource as well?
I've done it both ways, and I've done it a mixture. I think it depends on how big your team is and what you're trying to learn. Sometimes it's pulling in a freelancer, sometimes it's pulling in an agency.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's working with a different team. Like at Salesforce, I sat on Service Cloud, but Sales Cloud would do things that we hadn't done before. So I'd reach out to them, like, how did you do this? What worked? I think the Content Marketing Institute has a really good community. That's how we met. So
yes,
reaching out to that community and asking friends who have done it before, or experts who have tried it before. Sometimes it's just a little bit of discovery, and that doesn't require budget, it just requires time.
Well, and I was going to say that too. Sometimes it's just, I feel like hopefully marketers are normally very open to hop on a Zoom call or grab coffee and walk through and share their knowledge. So Content Marketing Institute, absolutely. I'm also dropping Amy's LinkedIn. If you have questions that we didn't get a chance to talk about, please connect with her, connect with me, but would definitely take advantage of some of the peer communities that are out there. Because you can get some really good nuggets there.
Yeah. And I'll also drop in a little plug. Monica Norton and I are speaking at Content Marketing World, and we're doing a workshop of how to say no and how to take a bad idea and turn it into a good idea. So going back to the beginning of the webinar, where you're trying to coach up, that's what we're going to focus on.
I will drop a link. If anyone's not going to Content Marketing World, highly recommend that you do. It's in DC for the first time this year, but I will definitely be going to that session. So I'll drop a link in our follow-up email. I know we're almost close to that 2:30. Amy and I can stick around, and we had some questions we'd love to talk about. But I did drop Amy's LinkedIn in the chat, so please connect with her. But I also wanted to offer, to this exact point, we know that, and I totally lost the Zoom. There you guys are. Hi. We just talked about peers and getting other, fresh set of eyes. So at Composely, we did create a content workflow audit where we will kind of take a look at your current progress. I'm going to hop on the call, and my goal is to give you one new idea or one perspective that you can take back and implement. So if you're interested, I'm going to drop a link to schedule that in the chat. I'll also launch a poll here. If you don't have that right now, we can follow up with you after, but we'll drop that in the chat for you. And then if you guys can stick around, we are going to do a few Q&A. But Amy, curious, one of the things that we got, this is great, especially if content is important to the organization, but what do you do if the org isn't fully bought in or doesn't understand the significance of ongoing content development?
That's a hard one. And I've seen that both at startups and I've seen it at larger brands too. I think you have to uncover what's not working and prove how content can support it. So one of my favorite statements was 10 years ago, maybe. SiriusDecisions said 60% of the buyer's decision process is already decided before they pick up the phone, they reach out to talk to sales. Now it's 90%.
Really?
So if you're looking at a sales predominant organization and they're like, oh no, our sales has it. You don't want to, it's almost like dating. You don't want to go on a first call and someone's like, let's get married. You want to do some internet sleuthing.
Yeah.
You want to figure out who their friends are.
Friend, it's like, hey, here's what I know. Go tell me what I should know before I get on this call.
Yeah, exactly. So to wrap it up, it's just finding what's not working and prove how content can solve that problem.
So that gets in actually really well to the next question, which was, how do you make a case for what can't be measured with content, which unfortunately tends to fall a lot in the brand category. But if you know that content's important and as much as I want to be like, just trust me, it works, it doesn't always, get the job done. How do you think about that or position it?
So I think there's a lot of things that could be quantitative, quantifiably measured. And there's a lot of things that you actually have to go out and ask people. So numbers are great. They're black and white. I love them. But getting those proof points of, I had a demand gen email that we sent out at one company. And it was sent to a customer. The customer emailed the CEO and said, I get your marketing material all the time. I usually just delete it. This one interested me. I opened it. Most creative piece of content I've ever seen. Thank you so much. By the way, can we set up another call? Like, having those nuggets of goodness shine more than saying we maximized our ROI or we doubled our conversion rate. It humanizes it. So finding those human moments of connection to prove what can be measured.
Well, a lot of times the people who hear that are not the marketers. It's sales, it's your CS leaders. So I know in my past, we've set up Slack channels or whatever that looks like for you that can create like a wins channel. And if sales hears something about a CS person dropping that in, or CS hears something about marketing, creating the feedback loop for not just marketing. I mean, it has helped shine a light on a lot of hard to quantify things, but creating that culture of recognition and sharing those wins too has been really helpful in my past as well.
Yeah, I love that. Nicole, do you do postmortems after a big program?
I have, yeah, like a retro. I've worked in a lot of like agile project management. And so after big projects, doing some sort of retro has been super helpful.
That's a lot of places that you can get those unquantifiable metrics.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, to prove points.
Awesome.
And sometimes it's more of just back to resource management. Did you feel like you could be creative in this process? Did you feel like the process worked well? Should we optimize it differently? That's where you can get, you can ask people questions around it.
Absolutely. One question, we'll end with this one, but if you guys have questions, like I said, please connect with us after. As we talk about efficiency and creativity in the process and the workflows, I think one of the things that we often have to struggle with is creating good, helpful content with CRO or SEO in mind and balancing those two things. And ideally they should work in harmony, but sometimes they don't. Like, how do you think about balancing that CRO versus the creativity of a piece?
I think creativity comes first and answering the need. comes first. Like you need to look at why is it needed? What is the audience really looking for? If you answer that, everything else falls into place. And especially with ChatGPT and AI coming in, if you become too robotic or if you become too method focused, you're actually not going to differentiate yourself. So it a year from now, it's not going to matter in SEO. So just be authentic, answer the questions, provide the help, be your most authentic, empathetic content marketing self.
I love that. That is a great place to end, especially as we're all trying to figure out the future of SEO and content marketing in general. I think speaking to the human, being authentic is absolutely the right way to go. So everyone, thank you so much for joining today. Like I said, we will send you a recording as well as the templates that we talked about. So keep an eye on your inbox for that. And then Amy, thank you again so much for joining us and sharing your insights from all of your experience. Definitely lots of great nuggets today.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. All right, everyone. We'll hope to see you have a great holiday weekend. And hopefully we'll see you next month for our next webinar.